A few blocks from Jenny's apartment stood a pizza place called Planet Pizza. It was bright and beautiful, but the most important thing about it was that Jenny and her boyfriend Adam loved their pizza. They had their first date in the place, and it was a part of their story. To be entirely truthful, there wasn't anything special about the pizza, but it was their tradition, and Jenny cherished it so much. To her, being in love was fun. It made her happy and healthy. She smiled a lot and didn't mind doing the dishes anymore. She was floating. She had been in a social rut when she met Adam. She had no friends, save for her sister, and she made no attempts to make any. Adam came into her life and changed all of that. He became her friend, her confidant, and her boyfriend. She loved him. However, when Adam called to cancel on her that Sunday evening, he said he wouldn't be able to go over to her place because he felt under the weather. Jenny felt like it was her obligation to go over to his place. So, she got home after work, got dressed in her favorite black tank top and a pair of jeans, and since the weather was a bit chilly, she picked up a beige cardigan. She bought 2 packs of pizza from the Pizza Palace, got into the waiting cab, and prayed silently that there would be no traffic, and that she would reach New Jersey before the pizza got cold. Jenny shared an apartment with her best friend and sister Karen, and she worked as a news anchor on a local news channel. She loved her job, but she didn't like her workplace. Her boss was a jerk, her colleagues didn't like her because she was recently employed, but more valuable than most of them, and 2 of them particularly liked to make fun of her hair. Jenny loved to watch Stranger Things, and her best character was Nancy. So, in the spirit of a stupid form of solidarity, she cut her hair and tried to imitate Nancy's own. In hindsight, maybe she should have stuck to her shoulder-length bob, or she should have gone to a professional salon, instead of letting Karen cut her hair in the bathroom while taking instructions from an unfairly pretty girl on YouTube. Needless to say, their hair turned out to be a disaster, and she wore a scarf to cover her head for 1 week straight, until the viewers made it their point of concentration, and her boss asked her to stop. Adam told her that it wasn't that bad, the hair. He said she looked pretty as ever, and that he liked the new look on her. Jenny knew that he was lying. Who liked their girl to look like a chipmunk? But she still appreciated him and loved him for it. The sweet man Adam. He made her laugh, he spoke sweetly to her, he cooked for her whenever he was over at hers, he sang to her in his crooked voice whenever she was sad, he spoiled her silly with gifts, and indulged in her K-dramas that she loved to watch. With him, she felt like she had won the lottery. She was the luckiest woman alive to have snagged such a handsome man and loving man. She really couldn't ask for more. If only she knew. The cab stopped right in front of Adam's building. She got out, paid the driver, and practically sprinted towards the door. Armed with her best smile, she knocked. It was about 5 seconds later when the door swung open and revealed a little boy of about 6. He looked uncannily like Adam with his copper-colored hair and pretty smile. She thought the boy must be Adam's nephew or something. She looked down at him and she was about to talk to him when she heard a woman's voice asking who was at the door. She drew her cardigan closer and stood up straight. She thought Adam was at a sort of family gathering. Then she wondered why he didn't tell her. The woman walked to the door and gave her a polite smile when she saw Jenny. She was dressed in a long tweed skirt and had a nose as straight as an arrow. She called out to the room, "Honey, did you order pizza?" Jenny started to say she wasn't a delivery girl and that she was there to see Adam when she heard his voice loud and clear from the other room. "No, babe, I didn't. Maybe they got the wrong address." Maybe if Jenny was calm, she would have listened when the rational part of her brain told her to go back home. It said to leave everything as it was at that moment and to avoid embarrassing herself. Instead, she pushed the door wide open and stepped into the house. Although they mostly spent the nights at Jenny's, she had been over to Adam's house a few times during their 3 years' relationship, and she remembered the exact state of Adam's house all the time she had come over. The living room was painted gray and white, and there was a huge television that faced the couch. A plush gray rug sat in the middle of the room, and on the rug was a glass table that was usually kept clean. The kitchen was also large and modern with various appliances that he never seemed to use. His bedroom was painted the same colors as the living room, and his bathroom was large with a big tub enough for 7 kids to swim in it. But now there were a few noticeable changes to the bachelor's crib that she was used to. There was a vase of flowers on the glass table, several colorful throw pillows were placed decoratively on the couch. The plush gray rug was replaced by a bright red one, and a family photo was placed right next to the television. Jenny felt like puking. The woman who met her at the door started to yell at her, asked her who gave her permission to waltz into their house, and threatened to call the cops on her. But the woman was the least of her worries. Her eyes were fixated directly on Adam, who sat in a rigid position and looked horrified. She threw the box of pizza at him and the woman screamed, "What is it with you? What do you want?" Jenny turned to face her. "How do you know Adam?" The woman, it seemed she didn't have an inside voice, screamed again. "How do I know Adam? Who are you to ask me how I know my husband?" Just then, Adam seemed to regain his voice and said to the little boy, "Jake, son, why don't you go upstairs?" The boy, wide-eyed with surprise from the soap opera playing out right in front of him, took tentative steps towards the stairs and turned back to peek when he got to the top. Adam gave a tight smile and waved as though to convince him, and the boy disappeared into a room. The woman, Adam's wife, then turned to face him. "Babe, do you know this crazy woman?" Jenny did not wait around to hear Adam deny her or trample on her already broken heart. She did not want to see his face again. All she wanted to do was curl up in her bed and cry. For about the 1,000th time in her life, she wished she was as violent as her sister. She knew for sure that if it were Karen in that situation, Adam would have gotten a black eye instead of an almost weightless pack of pizza that was thrown at him. But even if she was violent, she wasn't strong enough to hurt someone, so she just turned on her heels and ran out of the house. Yet again, she had seen the bitter part of being vulnerable to someone. Jenny had been constantly unlucky with love from the moment she was born. Her mom was a chronic drinker who believed in signs. Once she saw a shooting star and blew their rent money in the local pub because she believed that they were in luck and would get the money back tomorrow. The other time, she mistakenly stepped on her tiny mirror with her cowgirl boots and she crushed the mirror to powder so that she wouldn't have 7 years of bad luck. So when Jenny's dad left her when she was pregnant with Jenny for a chemically blonde 24-year-old girl that lived a few miles from them and always wore pink, she believed that the child in her womb was evil. She did not blame her always drunk, slightly insane self or Jenny's shitty dad for leaving his family and going with a wannabe Barbie. No, she blamed a little kid who didn't have the slightest clue about what had happened. So, she provided for Jenny no more than the law required. School fees, a roof over her head, feeding, and other essentials, but she never showed motherly love towards her. It's not like she could even show adequate motherly love because she was drunk most of the time, but she did the best she could for Karen. She taught Karen how to put on makeup, she binge-watched TV shows with her, she advised her about the boy she should date, and she went with her to the prom. She did none of these for Jenny, and when the girl tried to approach her, it took less than 5 minutes for her to scold her and blame her for her father's absence. Jenny liked to think that the alcohol her mom drank messed with her head a lot more than people knew. She thought that it was only the logical explanation for the fact that her mother blamed her for something that she had entirely no control over, for something that hurt her in a lot more ways than she showed. She never knew her dad, but in the small town she grew up in, everyone knew her dad. Oh, wasn't he that man that left his wife for the college girl? Yes. Do you know that his wife was pregnant when he left her? Wow, that's insane. I know, right? But I don't really blame him. The wife has a lot to deal with. Gossip spreads like wildfire in Eureka Springs, and everyone knew everyone's last name. So when the most popular boy in school asked Jenny out on an ice cream date, she was wary. Asher Carter's life was one straight out of a cliché high school romance book. He was the son of a local businessman, and his family owned one of the nicest houses in town. He was the captain of the school's soccer team, and he only dated popular girls like him, and his last girlfriend, Skylar, was the head cheerleader. It was sufficient to say that their status did not align in any way whatsoever, so she was skeptical to go out with him. Her sister, however, had other ideas. According to her, Jenny didn't live. She simply existed. She didn't do anything just for herself, and she was overthinking the whole thing. Karen badgered her until Jenny agreed to go out with Asher. After the date, Jenny was over the moon. She gushed about how sweet Asher was, how he spoon-fed gelato to her, what they talked about, and how he asked before he could kiss her. Karen was happy for her sister. She was not blind to her sister's suffering. She knew that a lot of time Jenny was jealous of the way their mother treated her. She knew that Jenny was tired of being blamed for something she knew nothing about, and she knew that her sister just wanted to feel seen. So when it seemed like Asher was finally seeing her, Karen's happiness matched her sister's giddiness. However, Asher and Jenny had been dating 2 weeks when he told her that he was no longer interested. He said she bored him and was punishing him by refusing to put out. Jenny cried. She was sad. She skipped school for 2 days, and when she returned to school, she found out that her sister had given Asher a black eye when she had heard some girls whispering the truth in the bathroom. Apparently, Asher was there at a party to ask a loser at school out, and he deemed Jenny the appropriate loser. What he failed to realize was that the chosen loser had a violent sister who boxed at the gym every week. Jenny wasn't hurt by the breakup with Asher as much as she was hurt that she let down her guard for a douche. She hung out with a douche and kissed him, and even after Karen punched the douche in the face, the scale wasn't tipped in her favor. Some people avoided her for the fear of what her sister would do to them if they had a fallout, and some blamed her for thinking that a catch like Asher could be genuinely attracted to a loser like her. Jenny shrugged it all up to high school silliness, squared her shoulders, and kept to herself. She didn't date again until she graduated high school. Then the summer before she was supposed to begin college, her sister, a sophomore in college at that time, took a break from school and asked her to come out with her friends to her summer house in Malibu. Before then, Jenny had never traveled out of town before. She packed up a few things, and with the money she had saved from working in a coffee shop, she bought 2 bikinis and got her nails done. That summer was the best summer she ever had. apart from the experience with the blue-eyed boy that lived in the summer house right beside Karen's friend. The boy, Jimmy, was pretty. He had the pink lips that seemed to stretch about a mile every time he smirked, and he liked to smirk. His tiny blue eyes complemented his striking blonde hair, and he liked to surf. That was what got them talking. Surfing. Everyone in the beach house where he stayed were all college students, and they had a lot in common from their experiences to their well-developed bodies. Jenny had recently just started filling her bra cup and nothing to contribute to their conversation about boys, so she stayed out of their way. Her sister, bless her soul, noticed this, and she spent as much time as she could with Jenny. But who couldn't choose to go to a party over babysitting their younger sister? When the girls got invited to a party in a house a few miles up, they left. Karen, however, promised to come back early so that she could spend some more time with Jenny. Jenny didn't like the silence that seemed to loom over the large house, so she put on one of the bikinis she got out, put on her sunscreen, picked up a book, and left the house for the beach. As soon as she got to the beach, she noticed Jimmy. Who wouldn't? The boy was surfing the large water body, his chest wet and on full display, and his black shorts clung to his muscular legs in ways that should have been illegal. Jenny watched as he surfed. He was obviously very good at it, and it was sort of satisfying to watch a pro surf. But that wasn't Jenny's reason for watching him. Her reason wasn't even that deep. She just found herself attracted to him. So attracted that she left her book closed and proceeded to subtly stare at him from the safety of her sunglasses. But when Jimmy came close to the shore, he noticed her and stopped surfing. He walked toward her. For someone who had only one disastrous experience with a boy, Jenny was confident when she spoke to Jimmy. It could have been because he was a total stranger and did not know anything about her family, or the spicy beach air worked a miracle on her body. Either way, she matched his energy, and they spoke for a long time. Again, it could have been the tangy air, or maybe it was the high of meeting someone new, but Jenny ended up confiding in the boy about her entire life. She told him about her mom, her absent dad, her big sister, and her shoddy self. He told her that he was in college, Arizona State University to be precise. He said he came over to spend 2 weeks on the beach and relax before he went back to study. He said he was a twin, and since he was the quieter version of his brother, he had always been placed in his shadow. They talked until they got tired, and then when he walked her home, he told her that he lived just next door and asked her if he could see her again. Of course, she said yes. The summer was finally looking up. That night, although Karen could not keep her promise of returning when she said she would, Jenny slept with a huge grin on her face, and the next morning, she woke up giddy and smiling. Her sister and her friends were all nursing huge hangovers, so Jenny stayed out of their way as usual and went to the beach much earlier than she used to. This time, she wore her other bikini. Jimmy, too, was at the beach, but he wasn't surfing. He was sunbathing in a pair of red shorts and dark sunglasses. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a fashion magazine, and it was all she could do not to stand and watch him like a hungry wolf, so she bent and tapped his shoulder. In a languid movement of his arms, he pulled up his sunglasses and squinted his eyes at her. They picked up from where they left off the previous day, but the conversation wasn't that deep. They had a series of shallow conversations. He asked her about her peeves and said she hated it when people bite their nails. He laughed and said that if that was the case then, she wouldn't have been talking to him 3 years ago. The conversation was lighter, easier, friendlier, and funnier, and Jenny found herself laughing more than she had in a while. They wordlessly set a routine. Every day around 4 in the evening, they would meet up by the beach and sunbathe together while they had various conversations. However, it wasn't long before the high of the beach wore off and they started looking for new things to try out. Karen told her about an arcade in town, and she invited Jimmy to it. They had a swell time playing every game they could. Jenny wasn't a big gamer and she lost a lot, but it wasn't about the games. It was about the time she spent with Jimmy that mattered to her. She laughed and drank her Sprite and slapped him lightly on the arm each time he made fun of her for losing. It was a beautiful night. One about to be ruined by Jimmy. When they got home, Karen and her friends weren't there. She checked her phone and saw a text from Karen that said they went for a bonfire and will be back late. Jenny wasn't bothered. She had her own person to spend the summer with, and she happily went over with Jimmy to his house when he asked her to. To her credit, he did not seem like someone that would hurt her or be a serial killer, but to her discredit, what did serial killers look like? Jenny thought a couple of days at the beach, numerous conversations, honest laughter, and a few hours at the arcade meant that she shared something special with Jimmy, and actually knew him for who he was. So when he said that his brother had converted a room in their place to a karaoke room and asked Jenny to spend some time over at his to sing some songs, she said okay. What could go wrong, right? Jimmy's summer house was stunning. It was just like the one that she was staying at in for the summer, but its decorations stood out. There were 2 couches in the living room. One was white and the other blue. There was a blue and white rug too, but instead of being directly under the table and in the middle of the living room, it was in front of the large TV wall. 2 fake plants flanked the TV, and a huge chandelier hung from the ceiling. But there was no one in the house, save for the 2 of them. When she asked him about it, He said that his brother did not come over this summer and that his parents were out for a mixer at their friend's house, and Jenny nodded. He ordered a can of Sprite, and she said no. She felt bloated from all the soda she had at the arcade. Then he suggested that they watch the Titanic, but it was already some minutes past 8 o'clock at night, and the movie's runtime was about 3 hours long, so Jenny refused to. Then she reminded him about the karaoke plans, and he led her to a room next to the living room. The room was dark, and he shut the door before he put on the light. When he put on the lights, she noticed that it wasn't a karaoke room. The only musical instrument in the room was a brown guitar that was placed safely by the bed. Her brows rose in question, and he secured the bolt of the door in place. That was when she started to scream. She screamed as she had never screamed before, but the house next to his was the one she stayed in with Karen and her friends. Karen and her friends who were out at a bonfire. When Jimmy slapped one hand over her mouth, that was when she knew that she never really knew the boy with the blonde hair and blue eyes. That's when she realized her stupidity. In that moment, she hated life and all the shitty things she had encountered since she was given birth to. But still, she fought. She screamed. She clawed at his face with her newly manicured nails. She kicked his stomach. Then he had enough of her weak defense, so he slapped her face hard, and bit her lower lip hard. For the life of her, Jenny couldn't see why he would want to hurt her. For an empathetic angel, he already knew all that she had been through with her family, from school and throughout her whole life. From a molester's angle, she was only just beginning to transition from her mosquito-sized chest to well-developed ones that girls her age worked with. But she failed to understand that molesters necessarily didn't need an hourglass figure to be gross. They just needed someone gullible enough to work with, and she was. However, as gullible as Jenny was, she did not give up easily. She continued to fight him. She was so happy that she had dressed in a t-shirt and jean shorts and not the tank top and short skirt that she had intended to wear earlier. At least, life had her back in that aspect. When Jimmy bent to pull her shorts, she hit her elbow on his head and he groaned and slapped her again. The slap was so heavy that it pushed her to lie flat on the bed, and just as she was about to raise her body and hit him again, her eyes caught the guitar that leaned on the bed. She lied down obediently. Jimmy, thinking that she had finally given up on struggling, bent down again to get her shorts, and she stretched her both hands as well as she could, lifted the guitar, and smashed it against his head. He fell flat on the ground. She ran out, bruises, tears, and all. Her sister wasn't back when she got home, so she ran to the bathroom and cried under the shower. In the shower, she thought about reporting the incident to the police, but they were only visitors in town, and she didn't even know where the police station was. She didn't even know how she got there. Even if she did, she was too shaky to give a coherent statement. Jimmy's family was obviously loaded, but the money for her and her sister's ticket to Malibu was all Karen's savings from the souvenir shop that she had been working on campus. She was scared. She thought no one would believe her. She knew that her mother wouldn't give a damn, so she kept quiet, said nothing, not even to Karen. All that she told Karen when the girl got back from having a good time was that she wanted to leave the next day. Karen thought she was sad over something that must have transpired with Jimmy, so she advised her to calm down and talk to Jimmy. But then Jenny started crying, and Karen had to get them from Malibu as fast as she could. Jenny kept her mouth shut about the entire incident, and she stayed away from relationships for a long, long time. Until the junior year of college. In one of the classes she took, there was a cute boy, Andy. He blurred the lines between being a bad boy and being a nerd, and as he wore Harry Potter glasses, had tattoos sprawled all across his arms, wore all black all the time, and carried a backpack of books all the time. He was also the professor's favorite in class, and he always read ahead of all the other students. The class was a tough one for Jenny, so the professor advised her to ask Andy for help, and she did. He tutored her every day after classes, and her understanding of the course picked up. She liked it. She became satisfactorily good in the course, and as a token of gratitude, she offered to treat Andy to dinner at one of the fanciest restaurants near campus, and he accepted the offer. They had a pleasant time during dinner. They made a lot of jokes, talked about a variety of topics, and when they stood in front of the restaurant waiting for Jenny's Uber, Andy asked if she would like to come hang out. As a date, of course. She said yes. She went out again with him, this time on a less expensive but eventful date. They had ice cream first from a popular ice cream parlor. Then he took her to see a movie where they spent the entire time kissing until a high schooler threw a handful of popcorn at them. Then they laughed and were shushed by a man and his wife in front of them. After the movie, they grabbed dinner together at Burger King. Then Andy dropped her off at her place, and with the chaste goodnight kiss on her lips, he went off. The date was nice, and definitely something worth following through. Why then did Andy ignore her text, go ghost mode, and ice her out the next week at school? It's not like she was in love with the guy or something, and even if he wasn't interested in her anymore, she could deal with it. All she wanted to know was why, but Andy would not pick up his phone when she called, and he only spoke to her on topics that concerned the class that they shared. She gave up, and she blocked him. After Andy, she blocked out every possible romantic lead and focused on herself. She graduated from college, moved in with her sister in New York, and got a job that paid as well as it could. Her routine was simple. Wake up, get ready for work, go to the grocery store, sometimes, catch a cab back home, eat, watch K-drama, and sleep. It was all she wanted, or rather, it was all that she thought she wanted. Her sister had always been the most outgoing among the both of them, and she always knew the best spots in every city to have a good time. She attended a lot of parties and always invited Jenny, who always declined. But Karen's colleague at work was throwing a rooftop party that Friday night, and Karen called it the party of the year. According to her, there were going to be a lot of good-looking men at the party, and Jenny needed to be there. Jenny said no. She pleaded with her and said she wanted to get drunk and needed a designated driver to bring her back home. Jenny still said no. Then Karen asked her whether she wanted to continue living her life that way and if she was comfortable with having no friends. Jenny tried to play it off with a laugh. She told Karen that she had all she wanted in life, but Karen could see through the entire nonsense, and she told her in a soft tone to try and get a life. Jenny knew that her sister was right. She needed to meet people, make some friends, and have a good time with them. After all, she was only 26, but what her sister didn't know was that all the time Jenny opened up to people, she was left with her heart in her hand, bleeding. What her sister failed to understand was that Jenny was not as social or as likable as she was. She had a quiet, sometimes brooding personality that seemed to ward people off, and whenever she tried to be as outgoing as her sister, the results would be terrible. She had several examples to give out: Asher from high school, Jimmy from the summer before college, and Andy from class in junior year of college. But what her sister said got to her. So she got up from the couch and went to her room to get ready for the party. Karen was delighted. The party was held in a spacious apartment uptown. The roof was large, the guests were many. People swarmed around with their glasses full of wine, their voices loud, music played from the speakers, and there was a buffet of hors d'oeuvres that people ate from. Jenny stood aside like a sore thumb. Her sister, being the life of the party, easily blended in and went to tell the host how nice of a party they had thrown. Jenny, on the other hand, grabbed a glass of red wine, leaned on the railing, and looked down at the moving vehicles. That night seemed bleak in the prospect of finding a friend, but other than that, it was not entirely bad. She liked the thrumming noise from the speaker and loved the feel of the cold air on her face. The party was a noisy bliss, and could also be considered a horrible event, seeing as she met Adam at the party. Of course, not horrible at first. "Not enjoying the party?" he asked. She did not lift her head before she replied, "I am enjoying it just fine, thank you very much." He did not leave, the outcome she had intended her clipped sentence to produce, so she raised her head to look at him. Adam was a fine man at 6'2". His height seemed to draw one in rather than terrify them. His warm smile accentuated his beautiful face and highlighted his cheekbones. His copper-colored hair looked soft and his brown eyes were inviting. It was an instant attraction. The very next day, they went out on a date. They went to a pizza place near the apartment, and they got to know each other. Or at least she thought she got to know him. He said he worked in an advertisement firm from Ohio, had a brother and sister, loved cats, wanted to get married in 6 years, and that he would love his honeymoon to be in Maui. Jenny was so very pleased with him and all the answers he gave to her questions. She felt very grateful to Karen for forcing her to attend the party, and she told her all about Adam. Karen had one dinner with Adam, and she told Jenny that she did not like him. She said that the man was a fake sleazeball who found everything way too funny. She told Jenny to end the relationship. Jenny was pissed. She yelled at her sister and asked her how she knew that Adam was a fake. She asked her when she became a judge of people's character, and Karen said she could always read people. Jenny then asked why she failed to read Asher Carter correctly and proceeded to blame her for the mess that happened between her and Asher all those years ago. Karen got angry and walked out to the gym. Needless to say, Jenny continued to date Adam, and he proved her sister wrong in many ways. He spoiled her silly, took her on a weekend vacation to St. Rhodes Island on her birthday, got a heating pad for her period cramps, and sent her flowers whenever she had a bad day. It was all surreal. Adam was everything she wanted in a man: thoughtful, empathetic, sensitive, beautiful, and funny. They went on a lot of dates: bowling, go-karting, road trips, and movie nights. Jenny was happier than she had ever been. She finally had her own person, and it was more satisfying than she ever imagined it would be. Only he was not her person. He was a married man, and he was married to the tweed skirt-wearing woman. Jenny ran far from Adam's residence. As she ran, tears streamed down her face, and the wind blew them right away. She ran until her feet hurt as much as her heart did. Then she slowed down until she came to a halt, and she sat down on a street bench. She was exhausted. It was cold, and she was glad she picked up her cardigan before she stepped out, and in her cardigan was her phone buzzing like crazy. She pulled it out and looked at it. Adam's name flashed on the screen. She had the sudden urge to smash the phone against the pavement. Instead, she ignored the call and put the phone back in her cardigan. She needed to focus on getting back home from New Jersey. As she stood up to locate the subway, Her phone buzzed in her pockets again, and she wondered why Adam could not leave her alone. He had already broken her heart. What else did he want? As she walked toward the subway station, her phone buzzed continuously in her cardigan, and she cried. From an early age, she had been cast aside as a problem, even when she brought straight A's back home from school. She was not applauded. Her dad never even came back, even if it was just to look at her. He knew her mom was pregnant with her when he left, but he never cared to even know whether she was given birth to or not. Every time she tried to open up to someone, it ended up badly, and she got thoroughly hurt. Maybe she was just really cursed. Maybe all that she deserved was bad luck. Maybe she should have stayed back at home instead of going out for the rooftop party. Maybe she should have stayed at home instead of going for a summer vacation with Karen and her friends. Maybe she should have listened to her brain when it told her to steer clear of Asher Carter back in high school. Maybe she did not need to be vulnerable to anyone ever again. Maybe she should only care about herself. When she reached home, it was a few minutes past midnight and her phone was still buzzing like a bee. As soon as she pushed the door open, her sister jumped up from the couch and attacked her with, "Where have you been? I've been calling you." She swallowed deeply, kicked her shoes by the door, and dropped her keys on the coffee table. Karen didn't like that she ignored her. "Do you not hear me talking to you?" Truthfully, Jenny would have responded to her sister. She wanted to. It was just hard for her words to get past the huge lump that formed in her throat. Only when she lifted her head to look at her sister did Karen see her tear-streaked face. "What did he do? Tell me," she demanded with such rage that Jenny thought if she told her, Karen would be on the next ride to New Jersey and Adam would be seen with a bruised jaw the next day. The thought sounded tempting, but also she knew that if Karen went over there, Adam's yelling wife would call the cops on her, and she did not want that. So she told her sister that she needed a minute, and she went into the bathroom to take a shower. Her sister waited for her in her bedroom, and when she came out, she bombarded her with questions. "What happened? Talk to me. What did he do? He didn't hit you, did he?" Karen only seemed to think whatever happened to her had something to do with Adam, and even though she was right, it sort of amused Jenny. Her sister never liked Adam, and she clearly stated that from the start. But when it caused an issue between them and Jenny still went ahead with the relationship, Karen had no choice but to apologize for trying to control her sister's life. Jenny, too, had apologized and they settled their differences. But Jenny knew that her sister still never liked Adam. It was visible in her sneer anytime he made a joke. It was visible in the countless evil eyes she gave him, and it was there in the fact that she thought he was the only one that hurt her. Karen was impatient. "Come on, talk to me." Then Jenny told her everything. From the time that he called her to say he felt sick, and now she thought she would go over with pizza for him. She told her sister about the cute little kid that answered the door and the woman that thought she was there to deliver pizza, the same woman that turned out to be Adam's wife. When she was done, Karen was beyond livid. "How dare he? I always knew you were too good for him, the sleazeball. I should go over there right now and punch his throat." That got a response from Jenny. "If you go there, his wife is going to call the cops on you." Karen scrunched her nose. "Oh, so she's like that?" Jenny asked. "Like what? Like prim and proper and stuff. I bet she wears pastels and pearls." Despite herself, Jenny smiled and said, "Calling the cops is not some prim stuff. But if it does make you happier, she was in a tweed skirt when I was there." Already pissed about talking about Adam and his family, Karen steered the conversation back to her sister. "I'm really sorry that happened to you." Jenny nodded and she continued, "I know that it hurts you. I understand how you feel about Adam and I'm sorry." Jenny nodded and said thank you. Then Jenny joined her on the bed. They laid in silence and looked at the ceiling, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Jenny's phone buzzed on the nightstand and she let out an involuntary grunt. Being closer to the phone, Karen reached out to the phone for her sister, but Jenny already guessed the caller. And from the swear words that came out of Karen's mouth, her guess was right. "Put the phone back on the nightstand," Jenny told her. "What does he want? What is his problem?" Karen asked. "I don't know. Just drop the phone." "No, I'm going to answer it and tell him off." Then Jenny screamed. "Just drop the phone back on the nightstand." Karen did as her sister said and laid down on the bed. It was a few minutes before Jenny broke the silence again. "I'm sorry for yelling at you," she apologized. "It's okay. I know that you're not in the right headspace right now and would have just dropped the phone when you asked. I'm just really stubborn at times," Karen replied. They stayed in silence again for a while before Karen heard her sister sobbing. She turned to her and said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." Jenny sobbed. "Why do I always have the worst experiences? Why? Don't I deserve love too?" Karen rubbed small circles on her back as she cried in her lap. She cried out loud and then she sobbed silently. She whimpered and then she just laid there. All through, Karen held her and kissed her head and whispered soothing words in her ears. Then she fell asleep. 3 years later at Karen's house for Thanksgiving, they had an argument. During those years, Karen gotten married, adopted a kid, co-leased a house with her wife, and stopped punching people after she got a community service sentence for hurting a parent in her kids' parent-teacher meetings. Jenny, on the other hand, was still living at the apartment, had gotten a different job in another company, but still did not have a social life, and had grown her hair back to its shoulder-length bob. What caused the argument was something quite trivial, yet it represented something more substantial. Since Karen got married, Jenny spent all Thanksgiving days at her home with their wife, Laurel, and their kid, Darren. Laurel, a chef at a high-end restaurant in the city, always cooked, while Karen acted as her sous chef. Jenny was always more than happy to babysit Darren. However, that particular day, Laurel needed spice for the turkey, and she forgot to buy some when she did the shopping for Thanksgiving, so she asked that Karen go get some from the store. Jenny tagged along since Darren was having a nap in his room. At the store, they searched the aisle for spice, and when they found it, it was at the top shelf, and none of them could reach it. Karen asked a stranger next to them to help her get it, and he did. They appreciated him and left for checkout. While they were there, the stranger walked up to them and asked to speak with Jenny. Karen then proceeded to wait in the checkout line alone and waited in the car for Jenny when she was done. A while later, Jenny walked out to meet her in the car. "What did he want?" Karen asked as she put the key in the ignition. Jenny rolled her eyes. "To take me out on a date." "Yeah, right." Karen pulled out of the parking lot. "What do you mean, yeah, right? Why won't you go on a date with him? He's cute." Jenny agreed. "Yeah, he's cute, but I don't have time to get involved with anyone." Karen laughed. "You have more time on your hands than anybody I know. I mean that literally." Jenny rolled her eyes at her. "Literally? Do I have more time than Darren?" Karen nodded. "Yes, you do. After school, Darren has piano lessons, swimming practice, and fencing. You, on the other hand, sit in front of the TV and watch K-dramas after work." Jenny shrugged. "I mean, they help me relax." Karen gave it some time before she said, "For real though, when did you last have fun?" Jenny answered in a heartbeat. "Today. I had fun today over at your house with Darren." Now it was Karen's turn to roll her eyes at her sister. "You know what I mean, Jenny." "Actually, I don't." Kenny stopped at a red light and looked over at her sister. "Well, if you don't understand, I'm more than happy to explain it to you. When last did you go out, have fun, unwind? When last did you hang out with people?" "Well, for me to hang out, there should be people that want to hang out with me, right?" Karen glanced at her and asked, "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't have any friends." "Have you at least tried to make some?" Karen asked her. There was silence. Karen continued, "I knew it. You cry about having no friends and you make no effort to actually make any. You never put yourself out there, Jenny." Getting frustrated with the conversation, Jenny's voice went up a notch as she said, "And why would I want to put myself out there when I have received nothing but devastation every time I did?" Karen's voice remained calm as she said, "That is the problem with you. You pay more attention to the bad things that happen to you than the good ones. You give people power over you. You let them dictate your life, all of them. Mom, Asher." Jenny cut her off. "Don't you dare mention Mom. Don't you dare. I was stuck on the wrong end all my life and you weren't. You don't know what it feels like to be me. You don't, and you never will, so don't ever tell me how to live my life." Karen tried again. "You think I don't know how disheartened you felt when Mom treated you badly? Why do you think I cut off all contact with her as soon as I went off to college? It was because I told her to choose either both of us or none of us. Jenny, you are my sister and I love you. And that is why I do not feel happy and would not stand by the sidelines and watch you block off every possible person that tries to come into your life because of the few bad ones." Jenny scoffed. "The few bad ones? Think again. All the people I have ever opened up to have been the wrong people. All the people I have ever let into my life have been wrong." Pissed, Karen slapped her hand down on the console as she parked the car in front of their house. "There you go again, focusing on the negative. I'm in your life. You open up to me. Am I bad? You have Laurel. You have Darren. Why can't you be appreciative?" Jenny opened the car door with so much force, it was a wonder that the door did not leave its hinges. "Of course you are my life. You're my sister. Laurel and Darren are in my life as well because of you. Every other time I try to get closer to anyone else, I get burned. It has happened time and time again. You know this." Karen chuckled humorlessly. "You think I'm supposed to be in your life because I'm your sister? Have you ever come across family members who are strangers? I'm in your life because I know that you're cool and I love you. I'm in your life because you are my friend." Jenny walked into the house and slammed the door in anger, causing Laurel to leave the kitchen and rush to the living room to see the cause of the ruckus. Karen opened the door and walked in. "You know I'm right, Jenny. You deserve much more than you let yourself get. Yes, I know, I'm not you and I have not experienced what you have, and I'm not trying to one-up you or downplay your suffering here, but vice versa. You haven't experienced what I have too. Just because we don't let the bad times take control of our entire lives doesn't mean that we don't have them too. Mom is a jerk, Adam was a jerk, and so is every other person that hurt you. But don't let them control your life. Don't give them that power." Just as Jenny opened her mouth to reply, she saw Darren walking down the stairs, so she shut her mouth and went to get him. Laurel, who didn't want to get into the sibling squabble, was elated that it seemed to have wavered, and she asked her wife, "Babe, where's the spice you got from the store?" Karen turned to Jenny. "Jenny, where's the spice you got from the store?" Jenny's face scrunched up in confusion. "Why are you asking me? You were the one who stood at the checkout line." Karen nodded. "Yes, but I put the bag in the car, on the front seat." "Why would you put it there? You know that's where I was going to sit." Karen frowned. "I didn't give it much thought then. Didn't you feel anything when you sat down?" Jenny shrugged. "I don't know." Tired of the silly conversation, Laurel pushed them both toward the door, saying, "Go bring my spice back from the front seat or wherever." They went out, and Karen retrieved the squash spice from the car and waved it at Jenny, who stood a few steps away with Darren in her arms. When Karen got closer, Jenny said, "I am so sorry for yelling at you earlier. Karen smiled and answered, I know, I'm sorry too. Jenny continued, you were right, everything you said was right, and I know it. I have known it for a long time now, but I just preferred to ignore it. Maybe that's why it hurt me so much, because I realized someone else sees through me and my bullshit. I could have been kinder with my words, it just pained me to see you isolate yourself and build an ice castle around yourself. Jenny nodded and asked, what if I start breaking down the ice by going on a date with Jeremy? Karen's eyes bulged. You will? Her sister nodded. Absolutely. Then they got back to the house, and Karen handed the spice over to her wife with an accompanying kiss. Then she turned back to Jenny. Jeremy, though? His name sounds like that of an old douchebag. Now I kind of wish I didn't urge you to go on a date with him. Jenny laughed, and Jenny kept Darren company while Karen helped Laurel prepare dinner with the spice that was retrieved from the car. And they had dinner together. Some days later, Jenny did go on the date with Jeremy. She called him and they chose a location to hang out. They had steak and wine, and he told her that he was surprised that she called. She asked why, and he said that she seemed annoyed when he asked to talk to her the other day. She confided that she actually was, and then proceeded to tell him all that transpired that made her call him. That is too much information on a first date, right? She asked. He said no, it wasn't. He said he was actually glad that she told him about it, and he said, I would tell you that I would never treat you that way, but then I would just be like the other thousands of people who already told you that. Instead, I would like to show you. Would you let me show you, Jenny? She nodded. After dinner, he took her back home and promised that he would call her the next day. The promise reminded her of Andy from her junior year of college, but she shut that pessimistic part of her mind down. He said he would call her, and she would give him the benefit of the doubt until he didn't. And while he was at work the next day, he did call her. He asked her how she was and if they could have dinner together that night. She said they could, and he texted his house location to her and said he wanted to cook for her. This action reminded her of Jimmy from the summer before college, but she also shut it down. In a way, she was excited to see where Jeremy lived and how he lived. It was only the messed up part of her brain that was reminding her of all the times she put herself out and was hurt. She got back home after work, put on her prettiest black dress, curled her hair, and booked an Uber to his house. Jeremy lived in a condo in the upper part of town, and his space was exquisitely designed. It was all modern and sleek, and every piece of furniture was a shade of brown. But what intrigued her most was the smell from the kitchen. Jeremy had let her in, but now he walked behind her as she followed the scent to the kitchen. She peered into a bowl, and she smiled up at him. Pasta? He smiled back. That's the only thing I know how to make. She giggled and said, when you offered to cook for me, I got the sense that you did this often. I didn't know you only made pasta. With the lingering smile on his face, not minding that she was teasing him, Jeremy walked up to her. I would brag about my spaghetti, but I want to wait until you do that for me. And as for cooking, I can only cook on special occasions. Having him up close, her nose caught a whiff of his scent, and her brain short-circuited. And what's the special occasion today? His hand went around her waist. I have a beautiful woman in my condo. Isn't that worth celebrating? Jenny looked up at him. His eyes were intense as he gazed at her. She was sure her eyes bore the same intensity, and her brain could not even bring up a joke. He brought up his other hand, the one that wasn't around her waist, to push back a strand of hair from her face before he said, I like you, Jenny. She nodded. He smiled and asked her, do you like me? She nodded again. The free hand lightly rubbed a spot on her cheek and said, what's the matter? Cat caught your tongue? That's when she smiled back and said to him, I like you too, Jeremy. He pecked the spot that his thumb was rubbing on her cheek and asked her to sit while he prepared dinner. She took a seat on the kitchen island, and Jeremy continued to prepare dinner. When he saw that she was watching a video on YouTube to learn how to make the sauce, she burst out laughing, and he told her to trust the process. It took him more time than it probably would have taken her to make the food, and when he finished, he made a show of putting a red tablecloth on the dining table and lighting candles. So she teased him again. Do we miss the date on Valentine's Day? He shook his head in slight amusement and said, is this how you tease everyone? She shook her head at him. No, I only tease the people I like. He gave her an adoring look before he pulled his eyes away to focus on setting the table and said, I'm a romantic, always have been, and always will be. If I was in Jack's position on the Titanic, I would have kept Rose safe too. It's nothing crazy, just I believe how the woman I care about should be treated, with love. Jenny had never had anyone speak to her like that before, so all she did was just nod her head and take a seat when he gestured her to. The dinner was nice. No, the spaghetti was not delicious, the sauce was too spicy, and the pasta was half cooked. But the dinner was nice. Jeremy told her about himself. He said he worked as a manager in an event planning company, and he liked to paint in his spare time. He offered to show some of the paintings to her the next time she came over, and she asked what made him believe that there would be a next time. He answered that he just liked being optimistic, and it had gotten him so far in life, so why stop now? She then learned a lot of cool things about him. He said he had a pet dog growing up, and he named it Lucifer. His favorite food was toast. He liked to sleep for a complete 8 hours every night. He liked to jog every morning, and he liked to watch gay dramas after a long day too. She was over the moon at that last piece of information and immediately began to hound him about his favorite K-drama shows, but she saw that he could barely remember the titles of any of the shows and her excitement deflated. Then he promised to watch them back with her and her mood flew right back to the ceiling. Long after the dinner, Jenny was still at Jeremy's. They did the dishes together, he washed while she dried, and when they were done with them, they sat by a huge window in his place, looked down at pedestrians and talked about everything and everything. When she asked him, he told her about the first girl he kissed. He said it was a stupid day at a stupid party at a stupid age, and he went ahead to kiss the girl that he disliked the most in the entire school. He asked about her favorite color, and she told him that it was the color of his eyes. Then they both laughed together at the cliché. Then Jeremy held out her tiny hand against his large one and said, "You are fun, Jenny." She made a show of whipping her hair and said, "I know." He held the hand a bit tighter, causing him to look over at him. He said, "You are fun, you are beautiful, you are intelligent, you deserve it all. Any other person who told you otherwise or treated you unfairly did not know what they missed out on, and I will feel sorry for them. But honestly, I don't." Her eyes began to water, and he reached out to cup her face. He said, "Jenny, I know we just met, and I hope that I don't sound insane here, but I want you. From our first date, I knew that I wanted you, and I want you for the long run." He kissed her hand, the one that he was holding, and continued, "I bear everything out to you, and I will treat you as well as I can, I promise." She raised her free hand to push her hair back, and he caught the hand, kissed it too, and tucked it in the stubborn strand of hair by himself. She retrieved her right hand from his and used her hand to hold his face, and he cradled hers in his big palm. Slowly, as her heart beat wildly, her eyes fluttered close, and her face neared his, lips parted to meet his, and once they did, she felt such a tide of emotions, and she angled her head to get a better taste of the sweet words that hung in his mouth. When they parted for air, he placed 1,000 pecks on her face, and she giggled in his arms. Then he angled her face to his and asked, "Ready for new beginnings?" She kissed him again. Yes, of course she was.